Studio 5. This is the NBC 5 News at noon.
We've got a guest here in the studio with us, Tom Glasgow. Thank you so much, Marianne. We'll check back in with you. Tom Glasgow joins us now. He's a criminal defense attorney. And the judge may asking the question of the prosecution, if he had helped out, if he had cooperated, if he'd showed more of this mea culpa a little bit sooner, how much could he have helped himself, do you think?
Well, since the onset of this case, he has taken a position of almost flippancy. He has gone back and forth in and out of the courtroom. He signed autographs. Remember when he was first arrested, he was like, is this a joke? He didn't even really believe that this was happening to him. Right. He then goes on this whirlwind publicity tour. He ends up doing reality TV shows. He travels back and forth. His wife does reality TV shows. During the course of the first and the second trial, he generally takes this as kind of a, this is not a big deal thing. This is all about me. I'm the centerpiece. It's only until today that you hear these mea culpas, that you hear this, I'm sorry, the conciliatory tone. And whether or not Judge Zagel truly believes what Mr. Blagojevich is saying is really going to be relevant as to whether he takes responsibility or truly accepts responsibility for the charges that have been brought against him.
Tom, as we continue to discuss him talking to the judge, I want to keep you updated at home. Reporters in the courtroom reporting that Judge Zagel has said there are several things he wants to go through, some legal discussion, and then at the end of that discussion he will issue his sentence. So as we're on the air right now, that discussion is going on at the Dirksen Federal Building. Were you surprised at the apologies, at the over and over, I'm sorry, I have remorse, my family has nothing? This is not the Rod Blagojevich we've seen in the past few years.
That's correct. Up until the legal filings prior to the argument for sentencing, he was blaming the people around him. He was blaming his associates, he was blaming his advisors, and even during the defense presentation yesterday, they were still taking the position of he was duped, he was, misled, he was someone who did not do well in law school, he didn't make the grades that he was supposed to make in law school. He needed the advice of smarter, more intelligent people. They're the ones that truly did this, not other people. You shouldn't blame him. You should end up blaming the system in Illinois.
So, but back to the question about Zagel and what he had to say. How much of a difference would it make do you think, to Zagel, to the prosecution? If he had been more cooperative, he could have perhaps helped with some other convictions.
He could have, but in the federal system, you are given credit for taking responsibility. You are given credit for taking that step.
That counts in sentencing.
In sentencing. It counts towards mitigation. And when he doesn't take that step, then it counts against you. Likewise, when he testified, and Judge Zagel specifically found and stated yesterday that he believed that Blagojevich lied during the course of his testimony, he considers that obstruction. He considers that is an aggravating factor towards sentencing. Now, everything that had gone on, he believed that he lied when he was saying he was going to appoint Madigan. He believed that he was lying when he was testifying about other people during the course of this, and misled the jury and misled the public. Because of that, and because of where he was as governor of the state of Illinois, that's going to count against him for the sentencing. It's an aggravating factor, not a mitigating factor.
Tom, stay with us as we wait for Judge James Zagel's decision. He is speaking to the courtroom at this very moment. Let me interrupt here for a second, because there are some reporters starting to talk numbers, and they're in months, and this is not confirmed, but discussing anywhere between 151 to 188 months, and we've done the math. It would be 12 to 15 years, I think, Marianne.
Yes, it would, and that is exactly within the range a lot of people have been talking about. We know the prosecution asked for 15 to 20 years, but a lot of experts have guessed it would be somewhere 10 to 15 years. So this would fit right into that. And that sort of factors in, Tom, to what you were talking about. When you're talking about mitigating and aggravating circumstances as it relates to this sentence, this should be expected.
It should. I mean, because we've sent out a message before. We've sent out a message to previous governors that were corrupt and ended up being convicted of corruption. The last being Ryan, 6.5 years. You end up with Rezko, who is a subservient player to Mr. Blagojevich, and you end up getting 10.5 years. If you give him less than 10.5 years, do you deprecate the seriousness of the offense? Do you truly give a deterrent? Judges always deal with such abstract concepts such as justice and deterrence. And in order to give a message to someone who may not understand it, who has not accepted responsibility, tell you what, if you don't understand, I'm going to make sure you understand by giving you a big sentence.
Could this Hail Mary work, though? I understand there are tweets coming out.
Yeah, there is. There's some discussion that the judge is recognizing the fact that even though it came at the last minute, the last possible minute, literally, that his admittance and apologies today perhaps may spare him from that maximum. And as you were talking here, that wouldn't surprise you.
Well, I think that he is going to get more than Resco. I truly do, because as the governor, or as the judge said yesterday, the governor, by the badge of his office and by his actions in court, showed that he was the director. He was the one who ended up actually orchestrating some of these things. And we don't need to forget that he ended up attempting to sell a U.S. Senate seat to the highest bidder. He ended up blocking legislation or trying to block funds from a children's hospital, and then he lied to the FBI about it. So, I mean, are all these egregious things that he has done during the course of the thing, are they abuse of power? Yes, they are. And I think Judge Zagel is taking that into account.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, because I know that a lot of people in the public, and I know this doesn't factor into what the judge says, but it's interesting that around in the neighborhood where we have a reporter out there, and we'll talk to them a little bit later, the folks on the street are saying, yeah, we know he did this, but maybe about 6 years, maybe we don't think he should get that much time. It's interesting that the public's perception is different. I wonder if that does that say something about our culture here in Illinois, or?
Well, I mean, we've had these spirited discussions, prior to the sentencing date, and people look at prison and they look at it for, it should be reserved for the violent offenders. It should be reserved for the people who truly hurt people. But when you take abstract concepts like government, and when you take our faith in government, and government should work well, and the people who are elected to those offices are stewards of the people, and are the people who are to be trusted with public funds and with the fact that government should work for the people, and they twist it and they corrupt it and they turn it into something that it's not, we always look down on other countries that have, when they have dictatorships where they're juntas or they are corrupt kickbacks going on.
We have these laws for a reason. We want to set examples.
And we are the preeminent democracy in the world. We want to show that we're the preeminent democracy of the world. Someone like this comes along and corrupts that. Do you punish them and send a message to others who may want to do this that, hey, the sentences are going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. If you continue to do this, you continue to take bribes, you continue to corrupt the system, we're going to send you to jail for a long period of time.
I want to take you back to the Dirksen Federal Building because more quotes are coming out as Judge James Zagel right at this moment is considering the fate of Rod Blagojevich, and reporters are saying he's considering 12.5 to 15.5 years. Another quote coming from Zagel: I do accept his apology for the position he took in his testimony in assigning responsibility for his acts to others. I don't know if we can go back to Marianne Ahern, who is in the Dirksen Federal Building. So the apology accepted from Judge Zagel. Marianne, what's your reaction to that?
Does it make a difference is the question.
Maybe a year or two might have been shaved, but to hear that he might be getting between 12 to 15 years will be very, very disappointing to the former governor. One other quote that I'm hearing from inside the courtroom said that he marched, the judge believes that Blagojevich marched the people that worked with him down this criminal path. So if he believes that he was the leader of all of this, he clearly has to receive more than Tony Resco of that 10.5 years, wouldn't you think?
That's the one point that Tom Glasgow is making here, because he should have known what was going on in his own administration, and ultimately you're the ultimate responsibility when you're in charge.
But it comes to date. And a lot of people would say, where was that when he was on national television? Where was that when he had his media tour? Marianne, it is being factored in right now in the courtroom above you. Judge Zagel says he accepts the apology, but regardless, he's going to do, at least as you had said, Tom, a decade of time and perhaps 12 to 15 years. But less than the maximum. So this is somewhat in the middle.
I think he's not going to get the maximum, because in the appellate courts will look at it and say, well, did you really take all these factors into consideration? Yeah, I do believe that he's going to get more than Resco, and I do think that he's going to send a message. And I think Judge Zagel, like many judges that I've heard before, are going to say, look, your life is about your choices. And your choices are what led you to this point. And we've gone into court before, and I have, as Marianne said, watched people be separated from their families for extended period of times, and it is truly heart-wrenching. But the person who was found guilty was the one who made those choices that put them in that situation.
And let's remind everybody that when you are sentenced in the federal system, you are going to do 85% of the time. It's not like the state systems where you see half time and good behavior and all of that. You're doing most of your time. If he gets 12 years, you're probably going to do 10.
That's correct. He's looking at a decade of his life gone, and he'll be 65 before he gets to see and be involved truly in the world and in his children's lives again.
Speaking of his children, in his 18-minute speech to Judge James Zagel, he talked about them and apologized to them. And Zagel considered that, and I'm going to share some more information coming in from the court. Zagel says he believes what he did for his children was motivated for his true concern for children, taking that into consideration. Zagel saying, quote, "I'm sympathetic to the plight of the defendant's children, whether or not that factors in to him being convicted and sentenced." That's kind of like I understand you have family, but it doesn't matter in this case,
Well, the prosecution continually said, look, you brought this on yourself. You are the one responsible for your actions, and you ultimately did this to your children, which he acknowledged in his lengthy apology today. And sort of some of that is the way that I know the prosecution looks at this and where the criminal justice system really looks at this, right, Tom?
Right, and some of the defense, when the defense did their presentation yesterday, Zagel was the most engaged when they were talking about what a good father he was and how he interacted with his children. That was what really, really got to it. That was the strongest card to play. However, because Judge Zagel, like all judges, he's sworn to uphold the law, he's going to take into consideration all these aggravating factors. And he's done it before. Judge Zagel has sent people to jail for long periods of time, and he has separated them from their families as well. He's not heartless. He's just doing the job that he has been sworn to uphold.
As Tom sits here with us, we want to direct you to something that we're following up here in real time, and it is an invaluable resource. It's the Wardroom. And as we speak, you can even see there, things are coming in by the second. That top update is about 5 or 6 minutes old. So go to Wardroom, keep hitting refresh. If you're on Twitter, you already follow Wardroom. You'll hear some of the reporters tweeting out the statements that are coming from Judge Zagel. And there's one right there. Blagojevich's staff, this is James Zagel saying Blagojevich's staff did not march him down this criminal path. He marched them. It's a great resource as we sit here in real time and listen to what James Zagel is saying in a closed courtroom, because there's no cameras in there.
That's right. And federal court is that way. But I tell you what, and this is a fascinating thing. From a journalist perspective, we have to tell you, we did not have Twitter when Ryan was convicted and when he was sentenced. And it's fascinating to be able to see. We didn't have Blackberries that were working either. To see minute by minute what is happening inside a courtroom where cameras are not allowed. They're never allowed in the federal system. So this really is an opportunity for you, the viewer, as well as us journalists covering this story, to see for yourself what is happening. So we do encourage you to check out the Wardroom. It's fascinating.
It is. And the Wardroom is writing right now that Judge James Zagel is speaking directly to Rod Blagojevich, talking to him about his children, saying he should have stopped thinking about them, and that should have stopped him from crossing the line in the first place. So he is addressing those pleas from the governor, from his daughter, the former governor, from his daughter, who wrote that heartfelt letter that was in the media yesterday saying, "I'll be heartbroken without my father."
That's right. And these are the things, perhaps these are the real lessons. Maybe these are the things that will hit home to future politicians, that even though you do have children, it does not matter. The law has to stand above. You have to follow the law.
And it is tragically sad that the family is going to be broken up. But
it is.
Blagojevich was the one who chose to run for governor. He was the one that chose to put himself in the public eye. He was the one that chose to go down this path. And it is very, very unfortunate, but all of those things on the tapes are incredibly powerful when they're played in court, and he cannot come back now and change what he said on those tapes. Regardless of the fact that he didn't glean anything from that, he crossed the line.
Now, he was continually trying to get more of these tapes in, feeling that they would sort of make him sound a little bit better, give him a context that made it all work a little bit better. Why do you think Judge Zagel was so hard on saying, no, we don't need to hear anymore?
Because most of the tapes, according to Judge Zagel, were not relevant to the conversation. There are charges that are brought before the court, and then there are hours and hours and hours of tapes. Anybody who has done any kind of consensual overhear tape case knows that you not only get the relevant tapes, you get the 8, the 9, the 10 tapes that you've got, but you've got hours upon hours upon hours that you have to sit in your office and you have to watch surveillance and you have to listen to those tapes. Some of them are very, very nonchalant conversations about cell phones. Oh, yeah, I got a new cell phone, I got this. They're personal things, and then they're minimized after 2 minutes. Others are people just having conversations about random issues that may tangentially affect the case, but they're not relevant to the charges that are brought before the court. And I think what the defense counsel was trying to do was play tapes that showed Blagojevich in another light and showed him as a good governor, in hopes that perhaps that will sway the jury to show, hey, look, this is the way the governor, this is the way he talked all the time.
Well, we saw him in a different light today.
Yes.
An apologetic Rod Blagojevich in front of Judge James Zagel. We want to go back to the Dirksen Federal Building, because right at this moment, Judge Zagel is talking to Rod Blagojevich, and his sentence will come down any second now. And Marianne Ahern, I know you're checking your wireless device as well, because that's our only communication with the court. But this will happen momentarily.
Absolutely. And what Judge James Zagel